Hello everyone, my name's Pierre Draculea and welcome to my weekly art and illustration recap video where I talk about the art and illustration I've been up to this past week. So normally I would start with a little bit of my Friday Ricky B. the Rock and Roll Rat, but last week we actually had 2 Fridays covered because I did this video late. So we're going to jump right in on Monday with Myles Maarav's Pursuit of Happiness. And so Myles, this book, there's a video talking about the whole project, but I'm going through the letters of the alphabet, doing a couple pages of illustration for each. And after I finish, I'm going to go and write a bunch of short stories based on the drawings. And then I will, if I feel that I've got some extra smaller illustrations I want to do to plug into the stories as well, then we'll come back and have a phase 2 on this project, probably sometime in the fall or winter. But this week we were working on W, so we've got Myles. He is always double checking the focus on that thing. I don't trust it on my document camera. Anyways, Myles is water skiing, and up behind him comes a big whale, a humpback, feeding. You know, their mouths are like 10 feet wide, and they just come up like that and snap up all the fish and krill. I was watching a bunch of documentaries on specifically baleen whales, the really big ones, in the last week, and one of them in particular was talking about the illegal catch the Soviets were doing and whatnot. Maybe hey Pierre, when you're editing, stick a link below. But anyways, it's kind of fascinating. I have actually never been whale watching, even though I live on the coast. I should go, but I always have like such a hard time wrapping my head around and also photos are deceptive because, if this was a photo, Myles is obviously a lot closer to the camera because the whale's mouth would be about 10 feet across, and if Myles is probably about 5 feet tall, 5'4", something like that. Because I think, no, he's about 5 feet, because one of the Ricky B. Rat stories, Myles is running for city council, and the thing in Ratsville is they consider all politicians are liars, which they are. So they just vote for the tallest candidate because it's hard to lie about your height. Actually, you can. But you would notice, you'd look at the shoes, and if the shoes have a platform like this, they're lying about the height. But anyways, Ricky was helping Myles hand out flyers and stuff like that, and women were asking him, "Are you running for mayor?" And he'd say, "No, ma'am, my friend is," and he'd point, and they'd be like, "He's short." But anyways, at one point, Ricky is asked his height, and Ricky says he's 5'11", and Myles, the tip of Myles's ears come up to Ricky's chin, so Myles would be probably just about 5 feet tall, because Myles is half rat and half mouse, and you think about how small mice are compared to rats. So, anyways, point is, the whale's mouth, if Myles is 5 feet tall, the whale's mouth should be twice the height of Myles. So obviously the whale is further back, and you get this distortion. The reason why I mention it is when you see documentaries or photos of somebody who's whale watching, and they're doing like the selfie, and the whale's in the background, obviously it's, and even when you see, there were documentaries I saw where the guys were up in the Arctic tagging bowhead whales. Well, they're trying to get the back as the bowhead goes back down. So it looked like a small little area was coming up above water. It's probably, an area bigger than my table, just kind of skimming the water as the bowhead goes back down. But anyways, my point is, I have seen humpbacks, but from a distance, bringing the ferry back, and it's like off in the distance, you see the back arch and then the flukes come up, but it's so far away that the flukes only look like that wide. So obviously that, so anyways, I'm kind of fascinated by them, but I also have a really hard time wrapping my head around the size. I probably should go out on a whale watching boat and see. Obviously, they have to keep a certain distance. I think it's like 200 meters away or something like that. Maybe even like half a kilometer away. They like a few hundred feet is how far back they're supposed to be. Of course, sometimes the whales come up and get really close and all that. So, anyways, that's just kind of one of the inspiration kicks I've been on this week is giant whales, and Myles bore the brunt of that with his water skiing. And then the second Myles W page is a little more pedestrian. There's Myles sitting on his ass eating waffles and watermelon. And, knowing Myles, he probably wouldn't be satisfied with just the 2 waffles, but this might, well, those look like a clean knife and fork, so these might be the first 2 of many. If he's at a brunch buffet or something like that, he'll be wanting the waffles to just keep coming and keep coming and keep coming. So that's that. Now, there's obviously the Thorsons, so let's get onto the Thorson screen. This stupid thing came out of the clamp, and the clamp fell off the edge of the table, so I guess we're just going to turn that off and fix it after. Kind of get that to stay on the edge of the table and not fall off. Anyways, I mucked with it because we've got some light yellow and whatnot. This is for the Noah's Archipelago project. It was formerly the 2027 calendar, and then I kind of thought, oh, I'm going to put that up also so you can see what Noah's saying. It's formerly for the 2027 calendar, and then I thought, well, I'd been thinking for a while of doing like a Book of Days project. Used to be a Book of Days would be like every day what the saint of the day was, or like prayers and meditations for that day. There was one done in the 1800s, which was like included folklore, like legends about things that happened on this day or whatever. And Noah loves holidays, and he loves fake holidays as well, like Wear Something Gaudy Day or National Pineapple Upside Down Cake Day or whatever. He loves all that stuff. So I'm going to do a book of days based on that. And then these illustrations that we're going to be for the calendar, they're going to be like the left-hand side of a new chapter, right? So this is September. We don't normally see Ursula out of jeans and a t-shirt and her red sneakers, but, she is dressed for a day of mourning as if she was going to a funeral. That's her grandma, Ruth's mom Agnes's hat. And there's Noah being all proud of her little goth phase, when actually Ursula's just being melodramatic. Ruth, of course, doesn't understand because Ruth is a second-grade teacher. She willingly goes to school every day, which Ursula will never understand. But anyways, so Ursula's got her black dress and her belt and her grandma's black hat, her black shoes, and I don't know when this is scanned and put into a book if it's actually going to show the difference, but when you look up close, and maybe I'll just hold it up like this, you can sort of see the hat has a bluish undertone. Like I started with a blue marker and then added gray on top of it to tone it down, and then some black for the shadows. The dress had like a purplish undertone, and her belt has a reddish undertone. Her shoes have like a brownish undertone. And as I mentioned when I was doing the stream, back when I was still doing the goth thing and all black and all that, that was a constant annoyance because, well, even now, like my shirt has a bluish, it wouldn't pick up in the camera, my shirt has a bluish undertone. And then I'm wearing leggings that have almost like a reddish undertone, Like there's so many different ways to get to black. And if you're wearing all black, sometimes, especially in good lighting, you go out in daylight because obviously then that's the brightest light. And suddenly it's like, it looks like I'm wearing different colors. They're all black. Anyways. So that was something I played with. I don't know if that's actually going to show when this prints in the book. Probably not, you know. But anyways, from Noah's Book of Days. Now, this illustration took about an hour and a half. Oh, and what I did up here is when I was doing Noah as a webcomic and it was digital, I would have kind of, sometimes you'd have the background, it was like a kitchen like this or whatnot. And sometimes if you had just like a talking head here, instead of drawing all like that sort of stuff, I'd have like colors that were supposed to be a little bit like the mood. So Ursula, she's got red and orange for annoyance and anger, and then kind of grays for kind of a, depression. And Ruth is bewildered, so I used to use like a line, like a sickly green and yellow for that. And Noah, well, Noah's head is far enough down that his background is just the floor and the room. And it's obviously, it's a top-down look, so everything's kind of weird and foreshortened, but that is that. Because we finished a bit early, I took the time to do another of the cast portraits for the upcoming Noah's Archipelago treasury. I always still want to say anthology. It's a treasure collection of the first like 9 months, which I'm pretty close to being done. I'm waiting on getting an ISBN. You can get them for free in Canada, but you have to register. I know I've given this rant, but I may have cut it out for time's sake. So I'm going to try and make it as short as possible. But in Canada, you can apply for a free account with Library and Archives Canada as a publisher, including if you're a self-publisher. That takes 30 business days. So I'm about halfway through that now. And then once you're approved, they send you your login, and then you can log in to their site and request ISBNs, 20 business days. And then you can finish the book because you need an ISBN. I mean, you can get one for free from Amazon, and I am doing Amazon Print on Demand, but I don't want it to say the book is published by Amazon. I want my company name there. So anyways, I'm using the time to do a little bit of extra stuff for that book, and one of them, because it's the first Noah's Archipelago book, I'm doing character portraits. So this is Noah's eldest son, Adam. Last week we had Adam's girlfriend, Stacy. So I took, the last 20 minutes of the stream, and I drew this little portrait of Adam with a dumbbell, because Adam works out quite a lot. Presumably he would actually be lifting heavier weights than that, but maybe he's doing something like, a tricep press down. Usually you have to use smaller weights, so maybe he's just not quite got the weight up there yet. I don't know. So that was also on Tuesday. And now we need to switch to our iguana friend, our iguanid overlord. So last week, I don't have it in here, but last week I had done a couple sketches from Zamo's secret basement lab, and one of them was actually a map, which, you know what? Okay, I paused to go and fetch that. So let's get all the cords out of the way. Got shadows coming in, especially now that I've only got the one light on the one side. Anyways, I had started this, but I hadn't finished this diagram. So Zamo's pet human, Georgie, lives in a split-level house, which is based on one that my aunt and uncle lived in Richmond, BC. So you come in the foyer, there's Georgie's painting studio, laundry and bathroom, and like the water heater and stuff would be in there as well. And then you went up a few steps, so it'd be about 4 feet up was the level that had the living room, dining room, and kitchen, and then a few more steps up to get up to the second story, where the bedrooms were over top of this part of the house. Anyways, in the storage space, Zamo has curtained off this one little corner that Georgie's allowed to keep her crap in. We had this drawing last week. And then there's Zamo's secret basement lab is the rest. So I think I had assigned the areas. I don't know if I'm going to draw every single area. I might. But we have a few different areas. So computers and microscopes, surveillance zone and TV watching, radio-free Zamo. That's kind of a nod. I was thinking I was going to do this for the Zamo the Destroyer comic omnibus that I'm working on, because I started the comic 20 years ago and I never did a book of it. So I'm putting everything together, and it's the same thing with the wait for the ISBN number, right? But it occurred to me that in the comics, you see a couple mentions of Zamo's secret basement lab, but it would be like Zamo hanging out at this door, refusing to let anybody through. We didn't really see anything into the secret basement lab. I think there were like other comic cartoons that I didn't have as part of a comic, but I remember posting them on MySpace. It's like Zamo with electrodes, doing something to like Hoppy's brain. Hoppy is the character who's like a bullfrog who thinks Zamo's the Messiah. So I had that sort of a vibe, but I don't think it was ever really in the comics proper. So whereas Zamo went on hiatus in 2009, 2013. I was going to relaunch it. We've seen in the recap videos from a month or so ago, where I inked that, because I had never actually inked it. I drew it, like an 8-page reboot, and then didn't actually relaunch the comic, but in 2014 started doing a Zamo podcast. So in the Zamo podcast is where the lab really comes into play, and Zamo is down there a lot and whatnot. So I may use these drawings. I mean, the next Zamo, I'm not going to be doing a Wednesday stream next week, so the next Zamo stream would be, I think, on the 17th. At that point, we will wrap up the illustrations of Zamo's Secret Basement Lab, but all the Secret Basement Lab stuff maybe is going to be for a later book, because I have most of the scripts, like 95% of the scripts for the like 200 and some odd episodes of the Zamo the Destroyer show. So I'm going to turn those into short stories and illustrate the short stories, so that'll be another book. So that all the Zamo lab stuff might be bonus content for that book, rather than put it into the Zamo omnibus that I'm going to do this year. But anyways, whatever. We're going to, on the Wednesday streams, we got probably one, maybe two more Zamo Secret Basement Lab streams, and then we'll set that aside and move on to a different Zamo project. But we'll just show, so Surveillance TV Zone, Radio Free Zamo anyways, is supposed to be the area where Zamo is recording the podcast. From Research Library, Zamo's Secret Desk, Fun with Chemistry, Squirrel Brainwashing Station, Bunny Cages. Zamo would capture bunnies and this is, again, is like a podcast thing. Zamo would capture bunnies from the local park, and would try and get them to make chocolate. If you've ever seen like the ads for Cadbury's chocolate eggs, where the bunny hops along and then there's these chocolate eggs. So Zamo's trying to see if that was a viable business opportunity. Anyways, then we've got Zamo's Secret Storage and the Hydroponics Treat Farm. So last week we had seen the entryway, and I'll show. Then also we had seen the hydroponic zone. So this week we started with inking Zamo's squirrel brainwashing session, or a squirrel brainwashing session happening in the squirrel brainwashing zone, or squirrel brainwashing station. So anyways, almost got these electrodes in the, there's a word for it that's escaping me right now, but like where they put the cap on your head and they glue electrodes to your scalp, and that measures brain activity or whatever. And there's all sorts of like boxes, there's an oscilloscope, different gear and whatnot. And then Zamo's trying to hypnotize them. And the pendulum, the "you're getting very, very sleepy" thing, is like actually an acorn on a chain. And there's Zamo with safety goggles and a lab coat. Lab Ethics for Dummies, Zamo is using that as a basis to pile other stuff on. So clearly not reading that book. Squirrel Behavior 101, Psychology, Brain Electrodes, Experimentation. Anyways, other books about mucking with other animals' minds. Yeah. Can't even talk today. Anyways, then we had a couple more. So the Fun with Chemistry Zone, we just see a little snippet of it. All these like glass beakers under the work desk. Someone's got something bubbling away in a beaker with a thermometer on it and tools. And then the International Bank of Zamo is a hole in the basement wall. See, this one I'd be tempted to actually put in. It may be that only this illustration goes in as a record of the secret basement lab, because there is a comic where Zamo tries to open a bank account, and because Zamo isn't a human and therefore doesn't have a social insurance number, the bank can't help Zamo. So Zamo goes and like hides the money in a hole in the basement wall. So that's that. And then we've got some books that Zamo has, like WMDs for Fun and Profit, Dick Cheney's autobiography, the Anarchist Cookbook, and some other stuff. Just a little hint. So this one may end up, regardless, I'm kind of thinking this one will end up where we might just have a tiny write-up about the secret basement lab and Georgie's house or something like that. I can always republish them later, and the others would be, new. In terms of book publishing, obviously. By the time that book, the first Zamo podcast scripts book gets put out, it'll be, a year or two after now, so whatever. And then the surveillance area, Chimp Watch Station. Try to say it. Some things with Zamo are really easy to write and very difficult to say out loud. Anyways, it's a whole bunch of retro TVs and feeds from cameras Zamo has around. So there's Hoppy catching a fly out in the backyard pond. That's Wilhelm, who is Georgie's boyfriend. That's the intersection by Georgie's house, so Zamo can monitor people coming and going. A couple different garden, like veggie, leafy greens cameras, so Zamo knows when to go raid. The neighbor, Mrs. Churchman, watering her roses. Again, so Zamo knows when to go and raid and eat the roses. Some other neighbor's hibiscus plant, which Zamo would also be keeping an eye on to know when it's time to go eat the flowers. Georgie's cherry tree, again, for same reasons. Random car driving by, random bicycle driving by, so different neighborhood watch. And then Georgie across the foyer in the studio painting, and Zamo is spying on Georgie. The better to know when Georgie is busy and distracted, and then Zamo knows when Zamo can get up to no good. So now we are back to some Noah stuff for Thursday. And let me bring this back up. So the idea with Thursdays is I'm working on a coloring book, which will have a little story with it. And the working title is The A to Z of Noah's Job History. So Ursula comes, she's got this homework assignment about jobs. So she asks, Daddy, did you ever have a job? Noah's a stay-at-home dad by day, but he sings in bands at night. So technically speaking, really he has two jobs. The band one actually brings in some income because he has a wedding band, and wedding bands, they're not cheap. So they do, and his is fully booked. So anyways, he talks about different jobs he's had over the years. So back when Noah was a youngster in the 90s, you remember the Calvin Klein ads and all that were, dudes in their underwear, gigantic in Times Square and whatnot. So Noah got a call to be an underwear model, and he was so excited, whoa, I'm going to be in Times Square. So obviously the smiling portrait is what they got first before they told him the actual gig, which is that he's supposed to be the before picture. I used to read Muscle and Fitness. I know if you look at me, you wouldn't tell that I ever worked out. But back in the 90s and early 2000s, I read Muscle and Fitness a lot. And I did a lot of heavy weightlifting, which I need to get back to doing. But anyways, you would often see ads in the back of that for supplements. And it would be like clearly Photoshopped. Like the before picture would be some pudgy dude kind of looking bummed. And then it would be those Mr. Olympia looking guy next to him with a smiling face. And it was Sometimes they weren't smiling. Sometimes they just had a neutral expression, but like always, like the skin tone never matched from the face to the buff body. You know, like anyways. So those are always fun. So we're making fun of that. So Noah here, that's his before photo, but actually after he was told that he was going to be before, so he's just kind of like bummed. And here's the view of the photographer's computer. Obviously, this isn't a very 90s looking computer, to be fair. That's like a very modern looking laptop, but we'll just ignore that fact. But you got the cursor, and they have taken Noah's head off the other one, and they're on one layer, and they're just dragging it over to put it on top of the buff one. If you look closely, it says layers, doofus head, and buff dude body, and then some like random palettes and stuff like that for Photoshop. So, and that was one. So U is for underwear model. And then S is for sleeper. This was actually the third one I did last night. I had the underdrawing ready to go, which now means I have to do an extra underdrawing for next week in case I finish early again. But one of the jobs, when I was looking up like weird jobs that Noah could have had, one of them was sleeper, professional sleeper, which is somebody who goes and checks into hotel rooms, kind of like a secret shopper kind of thing. And they sleep in the hotel bed, and then they report their findings back to head office. You know, was the mattress comfortable? What was the temperature like? Blah, blah, blah. So quality control. And actually, there's a couple jobs that Noah's had that had to do with like quality control. I think the other S one is mystery shopper. And then the job, of course, that Ursula is most interested in is quality control taste tester in a chocolate factory. That, like, she has now figured out what she wants to do with her life. But anyway, we haven't drawn that one yet. So anyways, I did this one in the last like 25 minutes or so of the stream. I think I went a little bit over time. I was chatting with someone from the chat and blathering on and stuff. So anyways, we've got the modern art piece that could have been done by Georgie, Zamo's pet human. And he's got the sheets all kind of wound up and whatnot. He's got his little sleep mask. Of course, if he's actually sleeping, I guess you just color everything in with like a black pencil crayon, but that's up to you. You know, maybe he's crashing in the morning and the light's coming in, and that's why he had to have his little mask. Anyway, so Noah, the professional sleeper. And then I think this was, I can't remember, this I think was the second one I did. So Noah, the balloon animal. He's also dressed like a clown, but I didn't have him specifically as a clown as one of the jobs. My thing was going to be like every layer of the alphabet gets 2 jobs except Q, that the quality in the chocolate factory is the only one for Q. But there's a few that have 3 jobs. And the idea is going to be that these are just a sampling. He's had lots of odd jobs throughout his life. And then there's like a B plot where his mother-in-law bets him that she's had more jobs, but you know, she really only worked as a perfume girl in a department store until she got married, and then, you know, anyways. So that was a losing bet for Agnes, but that's beside the point. So here's Noah. He's got his balloon dog in the background. We've got a balloon butterfly, a balloon flower, balloon shamrock, and then, you know, he's wearing a balloon crown. So that was one of the other ones. And that is the end of the live stream work. And again, I'm just going to throw that out here. Got to bring this down anyways. Document camera is a pain in the butt. So again, that's my streaming schedule. And generally speaking, I stick to it. Next week, there's not going to be a Wednesday stream. I have a different event I have to go to. But generally speaking, there we go. And that brings us to Doodle Zone. I'm just going to go straight on with just the document camera now. And I haven't got a lot of doodles, but I've got a couple doodles. So this one from May 30th. Did I show this last week? I can't remember if I showed it last week. I think I did. I don't remember. Maybe I showed this last week. Because I know May 30th is the day I filmed the last video. And I can't remember if I drew this, beforehand. I can't remember if I filmed last week's video first thing in the morning or if I filmed it in the afternoon. Anyways, so in any case, in case we didn't already see this last week, Noah's got a couple popsicles. Ursula is wondering what the catch is. He's telling her there's no catch. Ursula knows better. She said, those are made with real fruit juice, aren't they? You're trying to make me eat health food. So anyways, and we are very close to being done this book, but at the rate I'm going, I tend to use this book a lot more for, like, if I'm out having a coffee with my dad, I take it with me and then I, work on brainstorming. So there's actually a lot of more writing in this book than actual drawing, but it's writing that is about future drawings. Anyways, now this book, we haven't seen this in over a month, right? I need to get back to doing like my first thing in the morning doodle, but I did do one this morning. We saw that one a month ago or whenever. And that was me at, 6:30 in the morning looking outside going, it's not raining, but it might rain. So I was like, oh shit, it's raining. Well, I'll go for a walk tomorrow when it'll be raining even more. I had the idea if excuses were weights, I'd be so buff by now. And for some reason, I drew myself with the Coach bag I scored at a thrift store last month. That actually I just have it in my closet because it's really nice and I don't want to ruin it by like taking it out in public or whatever. Total waste. But anyways, I don't know. I think I was going to draw myself holding like my sneakers or whatnot, and then got lazy and just like, I'm just going to draw a bag, and it's like shaped like the Coach bag. I'm like, okay. And the Coach bag actually is magenta, which shocked the hell out of me. I didn't even know they made anything that wasn't beige, but there you go. Anyways, so back to the main, and we don't need this anymore. So what have I been watching this week? Where's my inspiration come from? Well, like I said, I've been watching a lot of stuff about giant whales and old whaling stuff and whatnot. One of the things I've been reading this week has been like some sort of stuff about like planning book launches and stuff like that, because we're getting close, right? So I'm doing some research on comparing with what some of the other coloring books on the market are, and I have yet to find anything that looks like what I'm doing. So I don't know, maybe that's good. Maybe it means like I'm cornering a market that doesn't exist yet, and maybe it's bad because maybe there isn't a market for that. But I have, last month I did a demo at my local art gallery and was showing pen and ink. And I also showed in my sample book, I had a couple pages of the Noah coloring book, and I had people going like, oh wow, I would love a coloring book like this. Is this going to be in local stores? Blah blah blah. Like, yeah, I'll see if they'll take it. I mean, otherwise it'd be through Amazon. But anyways, so I was looking at that, and some again with graphic novels, it's hard to find stuff that's exactly comparable, because funny tends to be like comic strips. So it'd be like, well, the classic, of course, would be Garfield or Peanuts or whatnot, but also stuff like, what is it with the rat and the pig? Pearls Before Swine. So a lot of the funny comics that are books on Amazon are like collections of newspaper comic strips, which, I mean, the first Noah book is kind of like that, except the web version. And then most of the graphic novels are like superhero, or it's like, I got bullied in grade 4 and my life is still hell because of it, and I'm going to write a moping. Let's not go there. Like, there's a market for it, I guess. But like, I don't do that kind of work either. I don't do autobiographical, like I don't do graphic memoir. I don't do like, like, I'm interested in the whaling thing. I am not going to do a graphic novel about whaling. Like, no, like it'll show up occasionally in drawings like the one with Myles and whatnot. So again, I did an Amazon search thing is really hard to use in a lot of ways. Like when you can drill down to, you know, like comics and or no, if you want like humorous, you actually go humor and entertainment, humor, comedy or whatnot. Half of what's in any given category, if you're trying to look at like what are the top 20 bestsellers in this niche, half of them aren't even there. Like most of what's listed under humor and satire, under literature and fiction, it's like these are romance novels. You know, like they're not actually satire. A lot of what's in listed under comedy isn't like books that are funny, have a funny story. They're like Trevor Noah's book, and it's an autobiography. Like, yeah, I'm sure there's a lot of jokes in it, but it's not, you know, it's, to me, that should be on, there should be a category for like comedian autobiographies or something like that, right? So a lot of it gets jumbled up, and that makes research more difficult. But why was I talking about this? Well, I guess because it's some of what I've been reading. But it did get me thinking about some of my influences. Like I always talk about Bloom County being a huge one. But even like I was going like Salmon Max, and initially like I could picture them, but I couldn't remember the names. But I had a copy of Salmon Max Surfing the Highway because, like, back in the early 90s, one of my cousins got me into Salmon Max. And now it's like I can't find that book, but I still have like one or two like giant boxes of books at my dad's house. They're like 2 foot or 3 foot by 3 foot, where he had taken smaller boxes of books and just like piled them. So probably that copy of Salmon Max Surfing the Highway is in there. I got to look actually this weekend when I go to dinner at my dad's house. Because I know there's some stuff that I don't have at my house that's still there. But like when I think of Salmon Max, like it was a parody of detective comics and stuff like that. But it was freaking hilarious. So anyways, thinking a little bit about some of my old influences like that, even if I haven't had a chance to read them in a while. And I do have a ton of like, a couple of years ago, I did a little talk at my writers group about the history of comics, and I had purchased a bunch of, you know, classic graphic novels and classic underground comics and stuff, some of which I had read before because, you know, like I know in the late 90s, early 2000s, I read a lot of that stuff. When I lived in Vancouver, I would get them out of the library and whatnot. So I know I'd read some of it, and then I just got my own copies of things like Julie Doucette's New York Diary, or New York Story, whatever it's called. So anyways, I'm going to sit down and try and make some time in the next month to actually go and read or reread a lot of that stuff. And you know, just kind of looking at like what are the common tropes and things that I think I'm kind of doing accidentally. Because obviously I used to read tons of like newspaper comics and graphic novel type of stuff, funny, you know, humorous fiction and all that sort of stuff going back. So anyways, that was another thing about inspiration, is kind of sorting through that. So what's coming up this week? The usual streams, minus Wednesday, as I said. So again, I guess I do need the document camera. Let's bring those back. There we go. There's what's coming up next week other than Wednesday. So that means we are to the end of the show. So we're going to bring that in, sneak that in. Do subscribe if you enjoy. And most of what I'm talking about, of course, happens over on my main channel. It'll be linked below. And subscribe to both, you know. This channel, eventually I'll probably do some like studio vlogs and whatnot on here. I just have some stuff I got to get organized in the meantime. So anyways, well, thanks for watching. I need to do a version of this that has Zamo in it, because I realized like none of my slides have Zamo, probably because I was just pulling from my digital stuff for Noah's Archipelago. But I really should have some Zamo in here. So I'm going to have to do some extras, but whatever. What I'm going to leave you with is the playlist, live drawing with Pura for my main channel, because you can check out these streams that I made this week's work with, as well as, you know, everything going back to, I think I started that playlist in January. So loads of live streaming art that you can check out there. And we will see you again next week. Bye for watching. Take care, and we'll see you real soon.